Let me tell you about a night that changed everything. A night when the most powerful man in London learned that cruelty has a price. And a struggling young woman discovered that courage can open doors she never imagined existed. This story begins at a place called the Golden Terrace, a fancy restaurant sitting on the top floor of a glass building in the heart of London. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where millionaires came to show off their wealth, where a single bottle of wine could cost more than most people earn in a month. The carpet was thick and red, the chandeliers sparkled like diamonds, and through the massive windows, you could see all of London stretched out below like a kingdom. For most people, the Golden Terrace was a fantasy. But for 23-year-old Sophia Reed, it was just a place where she worked 12-hour shifts trying not to collapse from exhaustion. Sophia wasn't supposed to be here. Just 2 years ago, she had been studying at university, working toward her dream of becoming a language teacher. She loved languages the way some people love music. She could speak 7 of them fluently, and she spent her free time learning the old forgotten dialects that most people had never even heard of. She had a gift, everyone said. So, a brilliant future ahead of her. But life doesn't always care about your dreams. When her mother got sick, really sick, with an illness that required expensive treatment the insurance wouldn't cover, Sophia had to make a choice. She could finish her degree and watch her mother die, or she could drop out and work every hour possible to pay the medical bills. It wasn't really a choice at all. So now, instead of teaching languages to eager students, she was carrying heavy trays and smiling politely at rich people who barely looked at her face. Her feet ached constantly, her back hurt, but every paycheck meant another month of treatment for her mother, another month of hope. On this particular evening, the restaurant was busier than usual. Every table was full of expensive suits and designer dresses. All of them talking too loudly, laughing too much, competing to see who could spend the most money. And at the center of it all, like a king holding court, sat Marcus Harrington. Marcus Harrington was the kind of man who believed the world existed to serve him. At 37 years old, he ran Harrington Investments, one of the biggest financial companies in London. He was handsome in a cold way with perfectly styled hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore a suit that cost £5,000, and he made sure everyone knew it. Tonight, he was surrounded by a group of younger businessmen who laughed at every joke he made, even the ones that weren't funny. They were afraid of him, really. Marcus controlled millions of pounds and he could make or break careers with a single phone call. So they sat there drinking his expensive champagne and pretending to enjoy his company. Sophia tried to stay invisible as she refilled their glasses. But staying invisible around men like Marcus was impossible. "Careful there, sweetheart," Marcus said without looking at her, waving his hand dismissively as she poured his wine. "That bottle costs more than you make in a year. Don't spill it." His friends laughed. Sophia's face burned with shame, but she said nothing. She couldn't afford to say anything. She had bills to pay, medicine to buy, so she just nodded politely and stepped back into the shadows, swallowing her pride like bitter medicine. The manager, a nervous man named Harold Jenkins, watched from across the room. Harold was the kind of person who was terrified of everyone, especially the wealthy customers. He lived in constant fear of complaints, bad reviews, anything that might cost him his job. He treated the rich guests like royalty and the staff like dirt. It was 8:30 in the evening when the elevator doors opened and everything changed. An old man stepped out into the restaurant. The room didn't go silent out of respect. It went silent out of confusion, maybe even disgust. The old man looked completely out of place. He wore a heavy gray coat that had clearly seen better days. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows and the buttons were mismatched. He walked with a wooden cane, limping badly, each step looking painful. His face was weathered and deeply lined, his gray beard untrimmed and scraggly. He looked like someone who had spent too many nights sleeping rough, someone who had been forgotten by the world. But his eyes were different. They were sharp and clear, a striking pale gray color like winter frost. They looked at the room with an intelligence that didn't match his appearance. Harold practically ran across the dining room, his face red with panic. "Sir, sir," Harold whispered urgently, stepping in front of the old man. "I'm sorry, but I think you've made a mistake. This is a private establishment. The shelter is about 3 streets down if you turn left." The old man didn't respond. He didn't even look at Harold. He just looked past him toward a small table by the window. Table 7. Sophia had worked here for 2 years, and she had never once seen anyone sit at that table. It was always empty, always reserved, though no one ever seemed to know why. The old man tried to walk around Harold. "Now listen here," Harold said, his voice getting louder, drawing attention from the nearby tables. "You cannot be in here. You're disturbing our guests. I'm going to have to ask you to leave immediately." Marcus Harrington turned around in his chair, a cruel smile spreading across his face. He loved drama, especially when it made him feel superior. "What's going on, Harold?" Marcus called out loudly. "Are we running a charity kitchen now? Is this some new policy I wasn't informed about?" The table erupted in laughter. Harold's face turned even redder. "I'm handling it, Mr. Harrington. Security is on the way." The old man stopped walking. He looked at Harold, then at Marcus. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. His jaw moved, his throat worked, but there was only silence. He touched his throat with 2 fingers, and shook his head slowly. "Oh, this is perfect," Marcus announced, standing up with his wine glass. "He's mute." A homeless mute wandered into the golden terrace. "This is the most entertainment I've had all week." Sophia watched from behind the service counter, her heart pounding. Something about this didn't feel right. Yes, the old man looked poor, but there was something about the way he carried himself. Something dignified despite his appearance. And that coat, even though it was old and worn, the fabric looked like it had once been very expensive. 2 security guards appeared from the back hallway. They were big men, the kind hired to intimidate rather than protect. They moved toward the old man, reaching for his arms. And that's when Sophia did something that surprised even herself. "Wait," she called out, stepping forward from behind the counter. Harold spun around, his eyes bulging. "Sophia, get back to your station now. He has a reservation," Sophia said, her voice shaking but determined. Everyone stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Harold hissed. "Table 7, Sophia said, thinking fast. "The permanent booking. I saw it in the system this morning." The silent guest. There was no such booking. But Harold was paranoid enough about administrative errors that he hesitated. I didn't see that," Harold stammered. Sophia walked forward, placing herself between the security guards and the old man. She looked at the old man directly, meeting his gray eyes, and smiled gently. "Your table is ready, sir," she said softly. For a moment, the old man just stared at her. Then, slowly, his stern expression softened. He gave the smallest nod, a gesture of gratitude that seemed to carry the weight of years. He walked past the confused guards and sat down at table 7, settling into the chair as if he belonged there, as if he had always belonged there. The room was frozen in disbelief. Marcus Harrington looked furious. His entertainment had been ruined by a waitress. You've got to be joking, Marcus said, his voice cold and sharp. Harold, are you really going to let this waitress make decisions? That man smells like he's been sleeping in a garbage bin. If he stays, I leave. And if I leave, Harrington Investments' corporate account goes with me. It was a threat that carried weight. Harrington Investments spent hundreds of thousands of pounds at the Golden Terrace every year. Sophia's job, her mother's medicine, her entire future hung in the balance. And in that moment, she realized she had just gambled everything on a stranger whose name she didn't even know. The silence in the Golden Terrace felt heavy enough to crush bones. Every person in that restaurant was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Harold stood frozen between Marcus Harrington and Sophia, his face cycling through shades of red and white as panic and fury battled inside him. Sophia's hands were shaking, but she kept them clasped in front of her, trying to look calm. Inside, her mind was screaming. What had she done? Why had she risked everything for a stranger? She didn't know this old man. She didn't owe him anything. And yet something deep inside her refused to watch him be thrown out like trash. Sophia, Harold said quietly, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. You are making the biggest mistake of your life. Get that man out of here or you're fired right now. This second. Sophia looked at the old man sitting at table 7. He sat perfectly still, his weathered hands resting on the table. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was just staring out the window at the lights of London, as if none of this concerned him. As if he was somewhere else entirely. I can't do that, sir, Sophia whispered. Then you're done, Harold snapped. Security, remove both of them. Wait, Marcus Harrington interrupted, walking over to table 7. He stood over the seated old man, looking down at him like he was examining an insect. I want to have a little fun first. Marcus leaned down, putting his face close to the old man's. Can you hear me, Grandpa? Or are you deaf as well as mute? The old man slowly turned his head and looked up at Marcus. His expression didn't change. He simply looked at Marcus with those pale gray eyes, calm and unreadable. I bet you don't have a single penny to your name, Marcus said, grinning. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp 50-pound note. He crumpled it into a ball and tossed it at the old man. It hit his chest and fell into his lap. There, Marcus said, take it, go buy yourself a sandwich and get out of my restaurant. The old man picked up the crumpled note. He smoothed it out carefully on the table, his movements slow and deliberate. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pen. It was an old silver pen, tarnished but elegant. He wrote something on the note and slid it back across the table toward Marcus. Marcus snatched it up and read it aloud. Not enough. The room burst into laughter. Not enough, Marcus repeated, turning to his friends. The beggar has standards. He wants more money. He turned back to Sophia, his eyes glittering with malicious pleasure. You know what? Since you know this gentleman so well, since you're so eager to defend him, you can take his order. But here's the deal. If he can't pay his bill at the end of the night, I'm calling the police. They'll arrest both of you for theft. Does that sound fair? Harold nodded eagerly. Very fair, Mr. Harrington. Very fair indeed. Sophia felt ice in her stomach. The cheapest item on the menu was £40. She had £23 in her bank account. If this old man couldn't pay, she was going to jail, and her mother would die alone in a hospital bed, waiting for medicine that would never come. But she had already made her choice. She couldn't back down now. Deal, Sophia said quietly. She walked to table 7, pulling out her notepad. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the pen. Sir, she said softly, May I take your order? The old man looked up at her. He tapped the menu but didn't open it. Then he reached for his silver pen and the napkin on the table. He wrote a single word in shaky handwriting. Salita. Sophia stared at the word. It looked Spanish, but it wasn't quite right. The spelling was wrong. And then it hit her. It wasn't Spanish. It was Basque, the ancient language spoken in the mountains between Spain and France, one of the oldest languages in Europe. But why would a homeless man in London be writing in Basque? The old man wrote another word beneath it. Ardoria, red wine. He was asking for steak and red wine in an ancient dialect that most people didn't even know existed. Sophia's mind raced. She had studied Basque in university, fascinated by its uniqueness, its isolation from all other language families. She had spent a semester learning its complex grammar and unusual sounds. Marcus Harrington was reading over her shoulder. What is that gibberish? Did he just have a stroke on the napkin? Sophia ignored him. She leaned close to the old man and spoke quietly in Basque, hoping she remembered the pronunciation correctly. Salita Ardo Goria Nahiduzu, she asked. Do you want steak and red wine? The reaction was instant and shocking. The old man's eyes went wide. His mouth opened in a silent gasp. His hand shot out and grabbed Sophia's wrist, not violently, but desperately, like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. Tears filled his eyes and spilled down his weathered cheeks. Bye, he rasped, the single word forcing its way out of his damaged throat. Bye Mesh. Yes, please. Sophia felt her own eyes sting with tears. This wasn't a homeless man. This was someone who had been lost, forgotten, silenced, and she had just given him back his voice. She straightened up, feeling a strange new strength flowing through her body. He'll have the ribeye steak, Sophia announced clearly. Medium rare and a bottle of the 2015 Rioja Reserve. Marcus's face twisted with confusion and anger. What was that language? What did you just speak? His language, Sophia said coldly. Something you wouldn't understand, Mr. Harrington. It requires respect for other cultures. Marcus's face turned purple. You little I'm taking his order, Sophia interrupted, her voice firm as per our agreement. She walked to the kitchen, her head held high, leaving Marcus fuming behind her. But as she entered the kitchen and put in the order, her hands started shaking again. The steak was 65 pounds. The wine was 350 pounds. Total, 415 pounds. She checked her bank account on her phone again. 23 pounds. She had just ordered a meal that would put her in prison. Back in the dining room, Marcus wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. Yes, police. I need a unit sent to the Golden Terrace restaurant. I have a suspected theft in progress. I want officers waiting outside in 30 minutes. The old man watched Marcus make the call. He didn't look worried. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small and heavy. He placed it on the table with a soft thunk. It was a key, an old iron key, rusted and ancient looking, with an unusual shape at the head. It looked like it belonged in a museum. Marcus saw the key and laughed. What's that? The key to your cardboard box under the bridge. The old man looked at Marcus, then at the key, and for the first time since entering the restaurant, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who knows a secret that will destroy you. In the kitchen, the head chef, a serious man named Marcel, looked at the order ticket and whistled low. Sophia, he said quietly. Do you know what you've done? If this man can't pay, Harold will have your head on a plate. Just make it perfect, Marcel. Sophia said, please make it the best steak you've ever cooked. Marcel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. For you. I'll make it perfect. 25 minutes later, Sophia carried the food out to table 7. The steak was beautifully seared, perfectly cooked, surrounded by roasted vegetables that looked like art. The wine bottle gleamed in the candlelight. She poured the wine carefully, performing the ritual exactly as she'd been trained. The old man waved away the tasting ritual and simply nodded for her to pour. As the dark red wine filled his glass, the old man looked up at Sophia. His lips moved silently, forming words only she could see. Sophia leaned in slightly and the old man whispered in Basque, his voice barely audible. Zergatic, why was she risking everything for him? Sophia responded in the same quiet Basque. Ada Anor Dio in Sudan. My mother has the same eyes as you and nobody listens to her either. The old man's face crumpled. A deep profound sadness washed over his features, followed by something that looked like gratitude so intense it was painful to witness. He reached out and touched Sophia's hand just briefly. His fingers were cold and trembling. Eskerrik asko alaba, he breathed. Thank you, daughter. Stop whispering over there, Marcus shouted from his table. Speak English. This is England. Harold rushed over. Sophia, step away from the guest. You're fraternizing. I'm explaining the wine pairing, Sophia lied smoothly. He doesn't even know what wine is, Marcus spat. He grabbed a bread roll from his table and threw it at the old man. The roll bounced off the old man's shoulder and rolled across the floor. The restaurant gasped. Even Marcus's friends looked uncomfortable. He had gone too far, but the old man didn't react. He didn't even look at the roll. He simply picked up his knife and fork and began to eat. And as he ate, he began to cry. Silent tears streamed down his face, dripping into his beard. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, and with each bite, he cried harder. Oh, look at this, Marcus said, pulling out his phone to record. The homeless man is crying because it's the first real food he's had in years. This is going on social media. #London charity case. Sophia felt rage burning in her chest. She wanted to scream. She wanted to smash Marcus's phone, but she held herself still, watching the old man eat his meal and weep. She knew those weren't tears of hunger. Those were tears of memory. That taste meant something to him. It was bringing back a life he'd lost. When the old man finished eating, he carefully folded his napkin and placed it on the table. He looked at Sophia and gave a small nod. It was time. Bring the check, Marcus called out gleefully. And tell those police officers to come inside. The show's about to end. Harold printed the bill with shaking hands. Sophia took the leather folder from him and opened it. Her blood turned to ice. The total wasn't £415. It was $2,870. What is this? Sophia stammered. We charged him for the full bottle, Harold said, his voice nasally defensive. And Mr. Harrington's table decided to add their drinks to this gentleman's bill. As a lesson, it's completely legal. That's fraud, Sophia hissed. That's business, Marcus said, standing up and walking over. If he can't pay, it's theft. And theft means jail for both of you. Sophia walked to table 7 on legs that felt like rubber. She placed the leather folder on the table. I'm so sorry, she whispered in English, forgetting the Basque in her panic. The old man opened the folder. He looked at the number. £2,870. He didn't gasp. He didn't protest. He simply reached into his coat pocket. Everyone leaned forward, eager to see what he would pull out. The old man's hand emerged from his pocket. It was empty. He patted his other pockets. All empty. He looked up at Sophia and gave a small, sad shrug. He's broke. Marcus roared triumphantly. I knew it. Harold, get the police in here now. Two police officers walked through the front doors. They looked serious, official, intimidating. "What's the problem here?" the older officer asked. "Theft," Marcus announced, pointing at the old man. "This man ordered a £3,000 meal and can't pay for it." The officer looked at the old man. "Sir, can you pay this bill?" The old man remained silent. "He's mute," Harold added quickly. "And a vagrant." "Sir," the officer said, stepping closer. "I need you to stand up. You're coming with us." Sophia stepped in front of the officer. "Wait, please. The bill is inflated. They charged him for food he didn't order." "Step aside, miss," the officer warned, "or you'll be arrested for obstruction." The old man slowly stood up. He was taller than Sophia expected. And even with his limp, he carried himself with an unexpected dignity. He reached into his pocket one last time. "Careful," Marcus shouted. "He might have a weapon." The old man pulled out the rusted iron key he'd shown earlier. He held it out to the officer with a steady hand. The officer looked at the key, confused. "What is this, sir?" "That's not money. He's trying to pay with garbage." Marcus laughed hysterically. "Maybe it opens his shopping cart." The old man withdrew the key. He picked up his silver pen and wrote on the back of the receipt. He handed it to Sophia. Sophia read the shaky handwriting. "Give the key to Marcel." "Marcel, the head chef." "The chef," Harold scoffed. "Why would our chef want your rusty junk?" The old man pointed toward the kitchen. His eyes were intense, commanding, desperate. "I'm done with this," the officer said, reaching for the old man's arm. "No," Sophia shouted. She grabbed the key from the old man's hand and ran toward the kitchen. "Sophia, come back here," Harold screamed. Sophia burst through the kitchen doors. Marcel, 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 the head chef, looked up from his station, his face annoyed at the interruption. "What is it?" "I'm busy." "A customer," Sophia panted, holding up the rusted key. "He said to give this to you." Marcel wiped his hands on his apron, scowling. "I don't have time for games, Sophia." "Who's the customer?" "An old man." "Silent." "He ate the ribeye." "He spoke Basque." Marcel froze. The color drained from his face. The ladle he was holding fell from his hand and clattered on the floor. "Basque," Marcel whispered. "Yes. And he's being arrested right now unless." Marcel walked toward her like a man in a trance. He took the key from her hand, staring at it as if it were made of gold. "Where is he?" Marcel demanded, his voice shaking. "Dining room. The police are." Marcel didn't wait. He stormed toward the dining room doors, still wearing his stained chef's apron, looking like a man possessed. Back in the dining room, the officer had handcuffed the old man. Marcus was filming everything on his phone, narrating with cruel glee. "Justice served at the Golden Terrace. Keep London clean, ladies and gentlemen." The kitchen doors exploded open. "Take those handcuffs off him." Marcel's voice boomed through the restaurant like thunder. Everyone turned. Marcel marched across the dining room, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "What are you doing?" Harold stammered. "Marcel, get back in the kitchen." Marcel shoved Harold aside hard enough to send him stumbling. He walked straight to the police officer and the handcuffed old man. "Take them off," Marcel growled. "Now, who are you?" the officer demanded. "I am the man who runs this kitchen," Marcel said. "And you are arresting the wrong person." He turned to the old man. And then Marcel, the proud French chef who never bowed to anyone, lowered himself into a deep, reverent bow. "Monsieur Hawthorne," Marcel said, his voice trembling with emotion. Nice P. I didn't know. I thought you were dead." The room went completely silent. Marcus lowered his phone slowly. "Hawthorne," he said, his voice uncertain for the first time all night. Marcel held up the rusted key for everyone to see. "This key," Marcel announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the restaurant, "opens the private wine cellar. Not the one we use. The original cellar in the foundation of this building. A cellar that was sealed 30 years ago." He turned to the police officer. "You are making a terrible mistake. You are arresting Elias Hawthorne, the man who built this entire building and half the buildings in this city." A murmur ran through the restaurant. The name sounded familiar, like a legend from a history book. Hawthorne. Marcus laughed nervously. "Hawthorne died in the 90s. He was some recluse who disappeared. This is just a homeless guy who looks like him." Marcel ignored Marcus. He looked at the old man with tears in his eyes. "Monsieur," Marcel said, "the stake was it. Was it correct?" The old man, Elias Hawthorne, looked at Marcel. He nodded slowly. Then he looked pointedly at his handcuffed wrists. Marcel turned to the officer, his face dark with fury. "Take them off now, or I swear you will regret this for the rest of your career." The officer hesitated, looking at the key, then at the old man's commanding presence. Despite his ragged appearance, something in the room had shifted. The power had moved. He unlocked the handcuffs. Elias rubbed his wrist slowly. He reached for his pen and paper. He wrote something and handed it to Marcel. Marcel read it and his eyes went wide. He looked at Marcus Harrington. Then at Harold. Then at Sophia. "What does it say?" Marcus demanded. "Does it say he's sorry?" Marcel looked up and a dark smile formed on his face. "No," Marcel said. "It says I would like to buy the building." Marcus snorted. "With what money? He couldn't pay for dinner." Marcel turned the paper over. On the back was a phone number. "He doesn't need money," Marcel said quietly. "He already owns it. He's calling the board meeting now." And that's when the elevator doors opened again. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime that somehow sounded louder than it should have in the deathly silent restaurant. 3 men in dark suits stepped out, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested military training or executive protection. But it was the 4th person who made everyone in the Golden Terrace stop breathing. The Mayor of London, Edward Carleton, was a man known for keeping his composure under pressure. He'd survived political scandals, economic crises, and constant media scrutiny without breaking a sweat. But as he stood in the doorway of the Golden Terrace, looking at the old man in the worn gray coat, his face drained of all color. Marcus Harrington, completely oblivious to the shift in power that had just occurred, smoothed his expensive suit jacket and stepped forward with his most confident smile. He donated heavily to the mayor's campaign. Surely the mayor was here to restore order, to remove this ridiculous old man and his defenders. "Edward," Marcus called out, extending his hand. "Thank God you're here. We've had the most incredible disruption tonight. This vagrant has been harassing customers and the staff has lost their minds. I need you to clear the room so we can get back to business." Mayor Carleton didn't even glance at Marcus's outstretched hand. He walked straight past the CEO as if Marcus were invisible, his eyes locked on Elias Hawthorne. The mayor stopped 3 feet from table 7. He swallowed hard, adjusted his tie with trembling fingers. "Mr. Hawthorne," the mayor said, his voice cracking slightly. "We received an alert from the Heritage Properties Division. A proximity notification. We didn't believe it was real. We thought..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Elias Hawthorne sat motionless in his chair. He didn't stand. He didn't nod. He simply lifted one weathered finger and pointed directly at Sophia. Mayor Carleton turned, looking confused at Sophia, standing in her server's uniform, holding a dirty rag, looking completely out of place in this moment. "Who is she?" the mayor asked carefully. Elias tapped the table twice, sharp and impatient. He picked up his silver pen and wrote on a fresh napkin. He slid it to Sophia. Sophia's hands shook as she picked it up. She read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "She is my voice. Speak to her. If you speak to me directly again, I will withdraw my backing from the Thames Gateway project." The room gasped collectively. The Thames Gateway project was a multi-billion-pound development that would reshape East London. If the funding disappeared, thousands of jobs would vanish overnight, and the mayor's political career would be destroyed. "I understand," Mayor Carlton said quickly, turning fully to Sophia with sudden, desperate respect. "Miss, please tell Mr. Hawthorne that we are at his complete disposal. Whatever he needs, whatever he requires." Marcus Harrington finally understood that something was terribly wrong. The humiliation was burning through him like acid. "Edward, what are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising with panic. "This is ridiculous. This is a homeless man. He couldn't pay a 3,000 bill." Elias's pale gray eyes narrowed. He looked at Marcus with an expression of pure contempt. He picked up the bill, the fraudulent invoice that Harold and Marcus had created. He looked at the total, £2,870. From his inner pocket, Elias pulled out a checkbook, but it wasn't a normal checkbook. It was bound in black leather with gold-edged pages. The checks inside didn't have a bank logo. They bore only a family crest, a raven holding a key. Elias wrote out a check with slow, deliberate strokes. He tore it from the book and handed it to Harold, who was shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. Harold looked at the check. His eyes bulged until they looked ready to pop from his skull. It's for £3,000, Harold squeaked. He added a tip. "Who cares?" Marcus shouted, his voice shrill now. "It doesn't matter. It's probably worthless. It's a fake check from a crazy old man." Elias tapped Sophia's arm gently. He handed her another note. Sophia read it, and with each word, she felt strength flowing into her body. She was no longer just a frightened waitress. She was speaking for a king. "The bill is paid," Sophia read clearly. "Now we discuss the building." "The building?" Mayor Carlton asked carefully. Sophia continued reading. "I built this tower in 1989. I leased the management rights to the Harrington Family Trust in 1994. The lease expires tonight." Marcus froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him gray as ash. "That's a lie," Marcus whispered. "My father built this tower. This is Harrington property." "Your father?" Mayor Carlton said quietly, finally looking at Marcus with something like pity. "Was a project manager. Elias Hawthorne financed half of London's skyline. Everyone knows that Marcus. We just thought he died 30 years ago in a sailing accident off the coast of Scotland." Elias wrote again. Sophia's voice grew stronger as she read his words. "I am revoking the management lease effective immediately. I am also exercising the breach of dignity clause due to the conduct of current management." Elias pointed one long finger directly at Marcus Harrington. Sophia read the final command. "Remove him from my property. He is trespassing." Marcus stumbled backward. "You can't do this. I have a lease. I have rights. I'm Marcus Harrington." Elias looked at the mayor. He raised one gray eyebrow. It was a silent question. Who really controls this city? Mayor Carlton didn't hesitate. He turned to the police officers who were still standing nearby, looking completely confused. "Officers," the mayor said firmly. "Mr. Harrington is trespassing on private property. Please escort him out. If he resists, arrest him." "What?" Marcus shrieked as the officers turned toward him. "You work for me. I donate to your pension fund." "Actually," the mayor muttered, glancing at Elias, "I believe Mr. Hawthorne owns the fund that pays those pensions. The officers took Marcus by the arms. The transformation was instant and complete. The powerful CEO who had been tormenting an old man just minutes ago was now being dragged toward the exit. His expensive suit rumpled, his face twisted with panic and disbelief. "No," Marcus screamed, kicking over a chair. "This isn't happening. Harold, do something." Harold was pressed against the wall, trying to make himself invisible. He wasn't going to help anyone. "Wait," Sophia said suddenly. Everyone stopped. Marcus looked at her with desperate hope in his eyes. "Yes," Marcus gasped. "Sophia, tell them this is wrong. Tell them, Mr. Hawthorne has one more thing to say." Sophia interrupted, looking down at Elias. Elias looked up at her, those pale gray eyes twinkling with dark amusement. He nodded once. Sophia turned to Marcus. "Mr. Hawthorne wants you to know that the steak was excellent, and he hopes you enjoy your future accommodations as much as he enjoyed his dinner." The officers dragged Marcus toward the exit. His screams echoed through the marble hallway until the elevator doors closed, cutting off the sound like a guillotine. The dining room remained frozen in stunned silence. The wealthy guests, who had laughed at the old man's humiliation, now sat with their eyes downcast, ashamed and terrified they might be next. Harold tried to slip toward the back exit, but Marcel stepped in front of him, arms crossed. "Not so fast," Marcel said coldly. Elias picked up his pen again. He wrote slowly, deliberately, and handed the note to Mayor Carlton. The mayor read it and closed his eyes. "I understand, Mr. Hawthorne." Effective immediately, he turned to Harold. "Mr. Jenkins, the health and safety executive, will be conducting a full inspection of this establishment tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. I suggest you have your records in order." Harold's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. His career was over. He wouldn't just be fired. He would be unemployable. Finally, Elias turned his attention to Sophia. The entire room watched as the old billionaire looked at the young waitress who had risked everything to defend him. He studied her carefully, noting her worn shoes, her tired eyes, the strength that had emerged when she needed it most. He picked up his silver pen one last time. He opened that leather-bound checkbook. He wrote out another check, taking his time with each number. He tore it carefully from the book and placed it on the table in front of Sophia. Then he wrote one more note on a napkin. Sophia hesitated. She didn't want his money. She hadn't defended him for a reward. She'd done it because it was right. Because no one deserved to be treated like garbage. Because she saw in his lonely eyes something that reminded her of her own mother. "I can't take this," Sophia whispered. Elias tapped the table firmly. He pointed to the note. "Read it." Sophia picked up the napkin with shaking hands. She read it aloud, her voice cracking. "This is not charity. This is your salary." "My salary." Sophia looked at the check. Her breath caught in her throat. It was for 150,000. "I need someone who understands that dignity matters more than money." Sophia read from the next line Elias had written. "Someone who knows languages but speaks the most important one, humanity. I need a personal assistant for the Hawthorne Foundation. The position includes full medical coverage for immediate family, including specialized treatment." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. He knew somehow he had known about her mother. Maybe he'd heard her desperate phone calls during her breaks in the back alley. Maybe he'd seen it in her eyes. But he knew. And he was offering her not just money, but hope. I don't know what to say," Sophia managed. Elias smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his weathered face. He wrote one final note. "Say yes, and then let's order dessert." Sophia laughed through her tears. It was a sound of pure relief of a burden she'd been carrying for 2 years suddenly lifting from her shoulders. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne, and the chocolate torte is excellent." As Sophia wiped her eyes, the diners in the restaurant slowly began to stand. One by one, they started clapping. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and it grew louder with each second. They weren't clapping for the billionaire. They were clapping for the waitress who had stood between cruelty and dignity, who had risked her future to protect a stranger's humanity, who had reminded them all that wealth and power mean nothing without compassion. Sophia stood in the center of that applause, tears streaming down her face, holding a check that would save her mother's life, knowing that her entire world had just changed. And Elias Hawthorne sat at table 7, the table that had waited 30 years for his return, eating chocolate torte and smiling like a man who had finally come home. 6 weeks passed after that night at the Golden Terrace, and London didn't forget. How could it? The story spread like wildfire through social media, news channels, and word of mouth. The silent billionaire and the brave waitress became headline news. Everyone wanted to know what happened next. What happened next was justice, the kind that unfolds slowly but completely like dominoes falling in a perfect line. Marcus Harrington's world collapsed in stages. And each stage was more devastating than the last. 3 days after being thrown out of the Golden Terrace, Marcus woke up to find his bank accounts frozen. Elias Hawthorne had called in every loan, every investment, every financial thread that connected Harrington Investments to the Hawthorne fortune. And there were many threads, far more than Marcus had ever realized. It turned out that Marcus hadn't built his empire. He'd been borrowing someone else's foundation and claiming it as his own. Within a week, the regulatory investigation began. When authorities dug into Harrington Investments' books, they found layers of fraud, embezzlement, Ponzi schemes, pension funds that had been raided and replaced with worthless paper. Marcus hadn't just been arrogant. He'd been criminal. The newspapers showed pictures of Marcus being led from his penthouse in handcuffs, photographers' cameras flashing like lightning. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by a gray prison uniform. His confident smirk had been replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man who'd lost everything. The trial lasted 3 months. The verdict took 3 hours. Guilty on 17 counts of fraud. Marcus Harrington was sentenced to 8 years in prison. His assets were seized to pay back the people he'd stolen from. His name, once associated with power and success, became synonymous with greed and downfall. Harold Jenkins, the cowardly manager, didn't go to prison, but his fate wasn't much better. The health inspection that Mayor Carlton ordered uncovered dozens of violations. The restaurant was shut down for 2 weeks. When it reopened under new management, Harold wasn't invited back. Sophia heard he was working at a coffee shop now, making minimum wage, living in a tiny flat in the suburbs. She didn't feel joy at his misery. She just felt sad that some people only learn lessons when it's too late. But Sophia's story, that was different. Sophia moved into a small office in Hawthorne Tower, a beautiful building in central London with windows that overlook the Thames. Her title was personal assistant to the chairman, but really she was much more than that. She became Elias's voice, yes, but she also became his partner in rebuilding the foundation he'd abandoned 30 years ago. Elias Hawthorne, it turned out, hadn't been homeless. He'd been hiding. One evening about a month after that fateful night, Elias invited Sophia to dinner at a quiet restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and honest conversation. He brought his tablet and typed out his story, the words appearing on the screen for Sophia to read. 30 years ago, the words said, "I lost my wife to cancer." She died in my arms in a hospital that I donated millions to, and still they couldn't save her. I was so angry. Angry at the world, at medicine, at God, at myself. I had all this money, all this power, and none of it mattered. I couldn't save the one person I loved most. Sophia read with tears in her eyes, understanding that pain too well. So, I left. The words continued. I walked away from everything. I wanted to disappear to see what the world looked like when no one knew who I was. I wanted to know if anyone would show me kindness when I had nothing to offer. For 30 years, I wandered. I slept in shelters. I ate at soup kitchens. I met people society had forgotten, people who were invisible. And what I learned was this. The world is cruel to those who can't fight back. Most people only show kindness when there's something to gain. But then I met you. Sophia looked up from the tablet to find Elias watching her, his pale gray eyes soft. You had everything to lose and nothing to gain, the words continued. And you defended me anyway. That's when I knew it was time to come back. Not to punish people, though some deserved punishment, but to fix what I'd abandoned. Sophia wiped her eyes. What happened to your voice? She asked gently. Elias smiled sadly and typed. A stroke about 10 years ago. It damaged the part of my brain that controls speech. I can make sounds but not words. Ironic, isn't it? A man who spent his life talking, buying, commanding, reduced to silence. But silence taught me to listen. And listening taught me who people really are. In the weeks that followed, Sophia discovered what it meant to work for Elias Hawthorne. It wasn't glamorous in the way she'd imagined wealth might be. Elias lived simply. He wore nice clothes now, but not showy ones. He ate good food, but never wasted it. He gave away money, enormous amounts of money, but always carefully, always to places where it would matter. The Hawthorne Foundation became focused on 3 things. Medical care for people who couldn't afford treatment. Education for students who had to drop out due to family emergencies, and dignity programs for the homeless and forgotten. Everyone deserves to eat at the table, Elias typed. One day, not just the crumbs, the table. Sophia helped him rebuild relationships with charities, hospitals, and universities. She translated his typed words into speeches, emails, and presentations. But more than that, she became his advocate, his fierce protector, the person who made sure that no one ever treated him as less than human again. And her mother, Mrs. Reed, received the best medical care available. The experimental treatment that insurance had denied was approved and paid for in full. 3 months after Sophia started working for Elias, her mother's cancer went into remission. Sophia would never forget the day she took her mother to meet Elias. Mrs. Reed, thin but recovering, walked into Elias's office with tears in her eyes. Elias stood when she entered, showing respect. Mrs. Reed crossed the room and took his weathered hands in hers. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my daughter and giving me time to watch her grow." Elias smiled and typed on his tablet. "Your daughter saved me first." Sophia's salary meant she could afford a proper flat now, something with 2 bedrooms so her mother could live with her. It had big windows and warm light, and on Sunday mornings, they would cook breakfast together, grateful for time they'd almost lost. But Sophia never forgot where she'd come from. Once a week, she volunteered at a community kitchen, serving meals to people who reminded her of Elias in his gray coat. She treated every person with respect, with dignity, learning their names, asking about their lives, because she understood now what Elias had been teaching her. Everyone has a story and everyone deserves to be heard. One evening about 2 months after everything changed, Sophia was working late in the office when Elias came in with his tablet. "Come with me," He typed. I want to show you something. They took the elevator down, deeper than Sophia had ever gone in the building. They went past the parking garage, past the maintenance level, down to what looked like a forgotten basement. Elias pulled out that old iron key, the same one he'd shown her at the restaurant. He unlocked a heavy wooden door that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. Behind the door was a wine cellar, but not just any wine cellar. It was a cathedral of wine. Rows and rows of bottles covered in dust. Each one priceless. Each one a memory from another lifetime. Elias walked slowly through the rows, running his fingers along the dusty bottles. He stopped at one section, pulled out a bottle, and showed it to Sophia. The label was handwritten, Wedding Day 1962. He put it back carefully and pulled out another. Rebecca's birthday, 1975. Rebecca, his wife. These weren't just bottles. They were moments frozen in glass and time. Elias turned to Sophia with tears in his eyes. He typed slowly. I sealed this room when Rebecca died. I couldn't bear to open another bottle without her. Every wine here is connected to a memory of our life together. I thought those memories would hurt forever. But tonight, I'd like to open one with you because you taught me that new memories can be just as beautiful as old ones. Sophia felt her throat tighten. I'd be honored. Elias selected a bottle from 1985. The label read, The Tower Opens. They went back upstairs to his private dining room. Elias opened the bottle with reverent care, poured 2 glasses, and raised his. Sophia raised hers. To second chances, Sophia said softly. Elias smiled, and nodded. They drank, and the wine was perfect, complex, and rich with age, tasting of time and memory and hope. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Sophia realized something profound. She'd started this journey thinking she was saving a helpless old man. But really, they'd saved each other. She'd given him back his faith in humanity. He'd given her back her future, and neither of them would ever be alone again. 1 year had passed since that extraordinary night at the Golden Terrace, and London had changed. Not dramatically, not in ways everyone could see, but in small, important ways that rippled out like stones thrown into still water. On this particular morning, Sophia Reed stood at the window of her office in Hawthorne Tower, watching the sunrise paint the Thames in shades of gold and pink. She wore a professional navy dress, her hair pulled back neatly, looking every bit the executive she'd become. But she still kept a framed photo on her desk. Her old server's apron preserved under glass with a small plaque that read, "Never forget where you started." Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Board meeting 9 a.m. Sophia took a deep breath. Today was important. Today was the day they would announce the biggest project of the Hawthorne Foundation's revival. She gathered her papers and headed to the conference room. Elias was already there, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, his silver hair neatly trimmed, his beard shaped and groomed. He looked like what he was, a gentleman of the old world, dignified and powerful. But his eyes, those pale gray eyes, were still kind. Around the table sat the board members, charity directors, hospital administrators, university chancellors, and one person Sophia was particularly happy to see, her mother, Mrs. Reed, who had been appointed to the board as an advocate for patient rights. Mrs. Reed was healthy now, her color good, her eyes bright. She gave Sophia an encouraging smile. "Good morning, everyone," Sophia began, standing at the head of the table. "Thank you for coming. Mr. Hawthorne has asked me to present our proposal for the London Dignity Initiative." She clicked the presentation remote, and the screen behind her lit up with an image. A building beautiful and modern with wide windows and welcoming doors. For the past year, We've been quietly working on something revolutionary, Sophia continued. We've purchased a building in East London, and we're converting it into the city's first true dignity center. It will provide free medical care, job training, language classes, and temporary housing for people experiencing homelessness or poverty. Murmurs of approval went around the table. But here's what makes it different, Sophia said, her voice growing stronger. Everyone who walks through those doors will be treated like a guest at a 5-star hotel. No judgment, no humiliation, no treating people like they're less than human because they're struggling. She clicked to the next slide, showing architectural drawings of a beautiful dining room. There will be a restaurant inside staffed by professional chefs serving restaurant-quality food to anyone who needs it. Because everyone deserves to eat at the table, not just survive on scraps. Elias was smiling, his eyes glistening with emotion. The centerpiece, Sophia continued, will be called the Table of Languages. We'll have staff who speak dozens of languages because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is understanding them in their own tongue. She paused, looking around the room. This project will cost $40 million over the next 5 years. Mr. Hawthorne has committed $20 million. We're here today to ask if you'll help us raise the rest. The room erupted in enthusiastic discussion. Questions flew. Commitments were made, and, within an hour, they'd secured pledges for $35 million. The project was going to happen. As the meeting ended, and board members filed out, Elias gestured for Sophia to stay. When they were alone, he pulled out his tablet. There's something else, he typed. Something personal. Sophia sat down, curious. I've been thinking about legacy, the words continued. About what happens when I'm gone. I'm 87 years old, Sophia. I won't live forever. Don't talk like that, Sophia said quickly. Elias smiled gently. It's not sad. It's realistic. And I want you to know what I've decided. He opened a leather folder and slid it across the table to Sophia. She opened it, scanning the legal documents inside. Her eyes widened as she understood what she was reading. This is my will, Elias typed. Everything, the foundation, the properties, the investments, the wine cellar, all of it goes to you. You are my heir. Sophia's hands started shaking. Elias, I can't. This is billions of pounds. I'm just the woman who stood between cruelty and an old man when you had everything to lose. Elias typed firmly. You're just the person who gave me my dignity back. You're just the daughter I never had. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. I don't want your money, she whispered. I just want you to stay. Elias reached across the table and took her hand. He squeezed it gently. I'm not going anywhere yet, he typed with his free hand. We have too much work to do. But when the time comes, I need to know the foundation is in hands I trust. Hands that will remember what it felt like to struggle, to be invisible, to be dismissed. I promise, Sophia said through her tears. I promise I'll never forget. Elias smiled. Good. Now stop crying. We have a ribbon-cutting ceremony to plan. 3 months later, the London Dignity Initiative opened its doors. The ceremony was held on a bright autumn morning. A crowd gathered outside the beautiful new building. Politicians, celebrities, community leaders, and most importantly, the people who would actually use the center. Men and women experiencing homelessness. Families struggling to make ends meet. Refugees trying to build new lives. Sophia stood at the podium looking out at the diverse crowd. Elias sat in a chair beside her, too tired to stand for long periods anymore, but his eyes bright with pride. A year and a half ago, Sophia began, her voice carrying across the crowd. I was a waitress barely making ends meet. I was invisible to most people, just part of the furniture, someone to bring food and take away dirty plates. She paused, letting the words sink in. One night, an old man walked into my restaurant. He was dressed in rags, couldn't speak, and everyone wanted him gone. They laughed at him. They threw food at him. They treated him like garbage. The crowd was silent, listening intently. I defended him, not because I knew who he was, but because I knew how it felt to be invisible. And that decision changed my entire life. She looked down at Elias, who was smiling up at her. That old man taught me something crucial. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The homeless man on the corner might be a veteran with PTSD. The woman struggling to afford groceries might be caring for a sick parent. The immigrant who can't speak English well might be a doctor or teacher trying to start over. Sophia's voice grew stronger. We built this center on one simple principle. Everyone deserves dignity, not charity that makes you feel small, not pity that makes you ashamed, but dignity. Respect. A seat at the table. The crowd began to applaud. So today we open these doors to everyone who needs them. Come as you are. Speak your language. Tell your story. You matter. You are seen. You are welcome. Sophia cut the ribbon and the doors opened. The first person to walk through was an elderly woman with a cane dressed in layers of mismatched clothing. She stopped just inside the doorway looking around at the beautiful space. The clean floors, the comfortable chairs, the smell of fresh food cooking, the staff members smiling and welcoming her warmly. She started to cry. A staff member trained by Sophia herself approached gently. Welcome. Would you like some tea or perhaps something to eat? The woman nodded, unable to speak. Right this way, the staff member said, offering her arm. We have fresh soup today and homemade bread. As Sophia watched the woman being treated with kindness and respect, she felt Elias's hand squeeze hers. He held up his tablet. Rebecca would have loved this. Sophia squeezed back. I wish I could have met her. You remind me of her, Elias typed. Strong, compassionate, stubborn in the best way. The rest of the day was a blur of activity, tours, interviews, and hundreds of people coming through the doors. By evening, they'd served 200 meals, connected 40 people with job training programs, and helped 15 families find temporary housing. As the sun set and the crowds thinned, Sophia and Elias stood together in the main hall, looking at everything they'd built. Do you remember what you wrote on that 50-pound note? Sophia asked quietly when Marcus Harrington threw it at you. Elias nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. You wrote not enough, Sophia continued. At the time, everyone thought you meant you wanted more money. But that wasn't it, was it? Elias shook his head. He typed slowly. I meant that money alone is never enough. Dignity costs nothing. Respect costs nothing. Kindness costs nothing. That's what people really need. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again. You've changed so many lives, Elias. We've changed lives, Elias corrected, typing firmly. You and me together. As they stood there in the gathering darkness, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a terrified waitress to the head of a foundation that would help thousands of people, from a silent, lonely old man to a philanthropist who'd rediscovered his purpose. Neither of them had been looking for redemption that night at the Golden Terrace. But they'd found it anyway in each other. 3 years later, Elias Hawthorne passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 90. He died in his own bed, surrounded by friends with Sophia holding his hand. His funeral was attended by thousands, business leaders, politicians, charity workers, and hundreds of ordinary people whose lives he'd touched. But the eulogy wasn't given by a politician or CEO. It was given by a woman who'd once been homeless, who'd eaten her first meal at the London Dignity Initiative, who'd gotten back on her feet with the center's help, and who now worked there as a counselor, helping others do the same. Mr. Hawthorne saved my life, she said simply. Not with money, though that helped, but by treating me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. He looked at me and saw a person, not a problem. She paused, her voice breaking. He taught me that falling down doesn't make you worthless, that needing help doesn't make you weak, that everyone deserves a chance to start again. As Sophia listened to the eulogy, tears streaming down her face, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The foundation was hers now. Billions of pounds, dozens of properties, hundreds of employees, all depending on her to carry forward Elias's vision. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right because she understood something now that she hadn't understood 3 years ago. Wealth wasn't measured in money. Real wealth was measured in lives changed, in dignity restored, in kindness given freely. Elias had been the richest man in London, not because of his bank account, but because of his heart. And now it was Sophia's job to make sure that wealth kept growing. 5 years after Elias's death, the London Dignity Initiative had expanded to 12 locations across the UK. They'd served over 500,000 meals, housed thousands of families, and helped tens of thousands of people find jobs and rebuild their lives. But Sophia's proudest moment came on a Tuesday afternoon when a young woman walked into the original center looking scared and desperate, wearing a worn server's uniform from a restaurant chain. Sophia happened to be there that day visiting the facility. She watched as the young woman approached the welcome desk. "I need help," the young woman said quietly. "My father is sick and I can't afford his treatment. I'm working 3 jobs, but it's not enough. I don't know what to do." The counselor at the desk smiled warmly. "You've come to the right place. We can help. Why don't we start with your name?" "Grace," the young woman said. "My name is Grace." Sophia stepped forward, her heart full. "Hello, Grace," Sophia said gently. "Welcome. You're going to be okay. I promise you, you're going to be okay." Because Sophia knew deep in her soul that this was why Elias had chosen her. Not because she was the smartest, or the most qualified, but because she remembered what it felt like to be Grace, desperate, and scared, not knowing where to turn. She remembered being invisible, and she had dedicated her life to making sure no one else had to feel that way. As Sophia sat with Grace, listening to her story, making plans to help her father, she thought about Elias and that fateful night at the Golden Terrace. She thought about how one act of kindness had changed everything. And she smiled, knowing that the legacy would continue, one person at a time, one moment of dignity at a time forever. Because in the end, we're all just one bad day away from needing help. We're all one tragedy away from being the person in the worn coat looking for kindness in a cruel world. The only question is when that moment comes for someone near you. What will you choose? Will you look away or will you be the person who steps forward and says you matter? You are seen. You are welcome at the table. Sophia chose the second option and it made all the difference. Remember, the person serving your coffee, cleaning your office, or sitting silently in the corner might be fighting battles you know nothing about. They might be one kind word away from hope or one cruel word away from despair. Choose kindness. Choose dignity. Because you never know when the person you help today might change your life tomorrow or when you might be the one who needs the help.